I was a regular delinquent who had just been expelled from school. But when a mysterious stranger attacked and killed my father, I learned that I carried the blood of a demon and decided I had to master the power to seek revenge. In ancient times, a race of demons called Oni lived in Japan, devastating everything and killing people mercilessly. No one dared to stand up against them. But then, a brave man named Momotaro appeared as the savior of humanity. He attacked the Oni stronghold, destroying thousands of demons. But that was only the beginning of a long war between Momotaro and the Oni, which has lasted until modern times. Unaware that this old fairy tale was connected to my destiny, I, a teenager named Shiki, was cleaning my gun collection while talking on the phone with a friend. I even joked about recently getting expelled for a fight and said that I didn't care, because I was sick of seeing the ugly faces of my classmates every day. Just then, my foster father, Tsuyoshi, arrived and smacked me on the head, demanding an explanation for why I was expelled. I told him to leave me alone, and Tsuyoshi tried to hit me again for my ingratitude. But this time, I dodged it. Tsuyoshi then asked me what was going on with all these guns, because our house ran a liquor store, not a gun shop. I immediately mocked him, saying the liquor store was about to close down, because everyone knew he was losing customers. Tsuyoshi wasn't pleased either, mocking me back for my arrogant attitude after being expelled. And I took it personally. I said that I would never become a failure like Tsuyoshi, and that I was truly relieved we weren't blood relatives. The words hurt him, but then he went downstairs because he had a work call. Tsuyoshi left to make a delivery, and I sighed, wishing some rich person had adopted me. I then tried to practice aiming, but an explosion outside startled me. I ran out to see what was happening, but a thick fog obscured my view. Suddenly, a strange jet of black mist shot out from the fog, and I fell backward in shock. The mist pursued me, grabbed my leg, and pulled me outside before throwing me onto the street. As I stood up and wondered what the hell was happening, a terrifying old man dressed in white appeared, ready to attack me. However, the very next moment, Tsuyoshi returned and drove his car directly into the attacker, telling me to get in. He drove away as fast as he could, saying our only option now was to leave the country. But I still couldn't process what had just happened. I asked Dad how he could kill someone with a car like that, but Tsuyoshi said the man wasn't dead, and we needed to go as far away as possible. He was truly panicked and told me to listen carefully, because we didn't have much time. Tsuyoshi told me that I was a descendant of the Oni, and the man who just attacked me was a descendant of Momotaro. I told him to stop joking because this was no time for games, but Tsuyoshi insisted he was being very serious. Just then, a blade made a black mist pierce through the car roof, and Tsuyoshi barely managed to dodge it. He realized the attacker had caught up, and then suddenly the car window was covered in black mist, blinding us completely. Tsuyoshi stopped the car near an abandoned warehouse and quickly got out, telling me that we needed to hide immediately. Right after that, the car exploded, and when Tsuyoshi looked back, he discovered that I had vanished. Fortunately, he saw a trail of black mist leading into the warehouse and realized his son had been taken inside. Inside the warehouse, I found myself trapped in a gigantic spiderweb made of black mist with a terrifying man named Samadare standing in front of me. Samadare told me that the blood in my veins was no different from an insect's, and destroying such insects was the job of the Momotaro organization. I was still shocked that Samadare survived being smashed by the car. But just then, Tsuyoshi appeared, telling me that the fairy tale about Momotaro was real. He said that for thousands of years, Momotaro and the Oni had fought each other through their bloodline descendants. Eventually, the descendants of Momotaro cooperated and established the Momotaro Agency, gaining an advantage in the war and forcing the Oni to hide among humans to survive. I still couldn't understand what was going on, but Tsuyoshi told me to let Dad handle it. Samadare suddenly created 2 swords from the black mist, and in response, Tsuyoshi unleashed a similar ability to fight him. The two rushed at each other, their blades clashing and creating a powerful shockwave. Tsuyoshi somehow managed to push Samadare back, but the man criticized him for being weaker than he used to be. Samadare explained that the black mist was a unique ability that only Momotaro's descendants could use, and Tsuyoshi used to be his superior in the Momotaro Agency. I was stunned to learn that my father was a descendant of Momotaro, but Tsuyoshi said he had forgotten all about it. Samadare asked if he had also forgotten how dangerous the Oni were. He declared that for the crime of harboring an Oni, Tsuyoshi would also be eliminated. Tsuyoshi responded by attacking first, but his strength and Samadare's were equally matched. I could only stand there watching their frantic fight in astonishment, while Samadare asked Tsuyoshi why he was protecting a monster whose only purpose was destruction. Tsuyoshi shouted at him to shut up and tried to inflict serious damage. But Samadare was much faster than he thought. He easily dodged the attack and then unleashed a super fast combo, severely injuring him and knocking him unconscious. I collapsed, seeing my father covered in blood, and cursed Samadare, screaming that I would kill him. However, Samadare said that I would soon join my father in the afterlife. Just then, Tsuyoshi grabbed his leg, and Samadare asked why he would go so far to protect an Oni, to which he replied that he needed no reason to protect his son. He said that I hadn't harmed anyone yet, and that killing me just because I had Oni blood was wrong. Samadare simply created a black mist sword to finish him off, and the rage boiling inside me finally reached its limit. As my eyes turned red, I swore I would kill the bastard who was trying to hurt my father, and my demonic power awakened. Blood began to seep from every pore on my face, and my pair of demon horns grew from the top of my head. I screamed that I would kill Samadare, and when the man turned back to look at me, he saw that I was no longer bound by the spiderweb. The very next moment, a volley of guns made of blood appeared right next to his face, but thanks to quick reflexes, he managed to block all the shots. However, I had already moved from that position, and while Samadare wondered where I was hiding, he noticed blood dripping from the roof, where I was hanging upside down like a maniacal Batman. Seeing my blood-soaked form, Samadare realized that I had awakened and could now fight by manipulating my blood. But that wasn't even the scariest part of fighting an Oni. Suddenly, I lunged at him, pushing him back with my powerful attacks. Samadare quickly turned the tables, slicing off my arm, but I jumped back and instantly regrew the arm. Then, I screamed wildly, and Samadare started to sweat as he realized this fight wouldn't be easy. I transformed my power into countless guns made of blood, and Samadare was forced to use all his strength and speed to block the bullets. Just then, I fired a damn rocket at him, and thanks to instinct, Samadare narrowly dodged it, the rocket exploding right behind him. The old man was forced to run from my brutal assault, but then he threw his sword at me, hoping to take me down quickly. However, it wasn't enough, as I rapidly closed the distance and kicked him away. Samadare was too tired and injured to move fast enough, and I stepped on his face before unleashing a military-grade salvo of bullets into him. Nevertheless, Samadare somehow survived, despite being severely wounded. He cursed me, but then I suddenly collapsed, and the guns made of blood dissolved. My transformation ended, and as I stared at my blood-soaked hands, I lost my mind, wondering what the hell had just happened here. Samadare recalled that this was a typical reaction for those who first awakened the power of the Oni. With his remaining strength, he summoned another black mist sword, determined to finish the job right now. However, just as he was about to stab me, Tsuyoshi jumped between us, sacrificing himself to save his son. Samadare asked him how he could risk his life to save the boy, even after seeing the monster he had become. Tsuyoshi only thought about how sweet a boy I used to be, and told his old friend that being a happy father, even for a short time, wasn't a bad thing. Just then, several civilians gathered at the scene after hearing the explosion and called the fire department, so Samadare decided to retreat. He transformed into black mist and vanished, leaving a wounded Tsuyoshi and a confused me alone. I panicked and told my father that I would call an ambulance, but he told me to stop because he knew this was the end. He just wanted to talk to his son one last time. Tsuyoshi told me that he could never tell me about my lineage, because that would mean saying there were people who wanted to kill me. But now he could only ask me to become strong enough to defeat both Momotaro and the Oni so that I could live freely and happily. However, I yelled at him to shut up because I wasn't finished with him yet. I started escorting him out, saying we would talk after he recovered, and Mr. Tsuyoshi just smiled at me once before taking his last breath. When he collapsed to the ground, I went crazy. First, I tried to wake him up and then started sobbing uncontrollably. Right after that, a man wearing roller skates arrived, and when I turned to look, he knocked me out with a single tap on the head before taking me to a place where only people like me could become stronger. While unconscious, I dreamed of happy moments when I played in the park under my father's watch. But then the dream abruptly turned dark, with the scene of Mr. Tsuyoshi dying at the hands of Samadare. I woke up startled, looking straight into Samadare's bloodshot eyes. But looking around, I found myself gagged and tied to a chair in a large, empty auditorium. Right behind me, the skater who kidnapped me was doing one-handed push-ups using his umbrella, and he stood up as soon as he saw I was awake. This cool young man introduced himself as Naito, a fellow Oni, and quickly grew horns. I was too confused by everything, and couldn't even pay attention to Naito, who refused to tell me where we were. He announced that my father's body was safely stored elsewhere, and he brought me here for retrieval and assessment. Naito then suddenly skated to the whiteboard in the corner of the room and dragged it closer to me, before bragging about how fast and efficient it was to use roller skates instead of walking. Next, he started explaining the Momotaro Agency to me, saying I had met a guy who could control black fog and use it as a weapon. The Momotaro Agency searches for and hunts Oni, and in retaliation, the Oni have formed their own agency to fight back. Naito said his job was to find newly awakened Oni like me and bring them to a safe place where he could assess whether they were worthy of joining the Oni Agency. With that brief introduction, he put the whiteboard back in place and then removed my gag so he could interview me. As soon as he removed the gag, I started yelling, demanding that he let me go. I also cursed at Naito, threatening to kill him if he harmed my father's body, and Naito immediately deducted 1 point from my score, which was already 0. He called me an idiot for not understanding what "safely stored" meant, because he had mentioned it minutes earlier. I blew up and said there was no way I could trust an ominous, cool guy like him, and Naito didn't expect anything different from me either. He decided to deduct more points every time I cursed and demanded to be set free, telling me to cooperate if I wanted to pass the assessment. I didn't care about the assessment, but I wanted to be free quickly, so I tried to suppress my anger. However, I couldn't even do that properly, and Naito told me to stop looking at him with those scary eyes. I went ballistic when I heard this, and Naito decided to assess me using an unconventional method because normal things didn't seem to work on maniacs. He took off his tie, and before I realized what was happening, Naito used the tie to choke me with all his might. I panicked as I suffocated, and Naito said that a creature's true nature would be revealed when it was near death, and that was what he wanted to see. I tried to resist with all my strength, but I couldn't escape the chokehold, even after blood began pouring from every orifice on my face. I quickly lost consciousness, and Naito looked disappointed. But the blood I just lost awakened its power. It turned into sharp spikes and attacked Naito, who dodged the blows without much difficulty. Suddenly, he saw a blood-made Gatling gun pointing at his head, and behind it was me in a state of frenzy. I fired the gun at Naito and then backed away, satisfied. But my attacks didn't even touch that cool young man, who protected himself by covering his umbrella with blood. He deducted 100 points from my score because I didn't even know how to use my Oni blood, and then decided to show me how it was actually done, even though I wouldn't remember anything when the frenzy ended. I suddenly charged at him, but Naito was prepared for everything, and a few minutes later, I woke up. Lying defeated on the ground, I couldn't figure out what had just happened. But then I looked at my red hands and panicked, realizing I had lost control again. Naito calmly sat on me, saying it was natural for my memory to be blank, because when an Oni falls into a state of frenzy, they lose their reason. Around us, the auditorium was a mess caused by our battle, and I told Naito not to lecture me when he was also using his blood as a weapon. Naito immediately made his blood umbrella disappear, telling me that he never went into a frenzy because he could actually control his power. He then declared that there was nothing more to say because I was disqualified from joining the Oni Agency. I still didn't know what the heck was going on. But if there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that Naito was ridiculously strong. I decided to swallow my pride and beg Naito to take me as his subordinate, because I wanted to become stronger and avenge my father. Naito immediately rejected my plea, saying that someone like me, who doesn't use their brain when fighting, would always be the first to die in a real battle. He called me a useless disgrace, unable to control either my mind or my power, and I used all my might to suppress my rage. Naito then declared that it was time for him to deal with me. Because a rampaging Oni is a burden to everyone, he used his special ring to cut his thumb, allowing a small stream of blood to drip out. He transformed the blood into an umbrella, and I suddenly got an idea of how to make him change his mind. I ran out of Naito's attack range, and then rushed him while dragging my fist along the ground until it bled. Naito quickly transformed his umbrella into a spiked shield that would protect him from any close-quarters attack, and then calculated the possible moves I might use. I jumped up at the last second, one of the possibilities Naito had calculated, but then I surprised him by using the spikes to jump sideways and pointing a blood gun at his face. I focused all my concentration on the gun, firing a powerful shot whose recoil sent me flying backward. I couldn't believe I had hit Naito, but it turned out I failed this time too. Naito simply blocked the blood bullet with his finger and shattered it. He didn't acknowledge my attack because I had almost fallen into a frenzy state to attack him. As I seemed to lose my mind again, Naito decided to finish me with his special move. He placed himself inside a protective cage and summoned blood archers, ready to fire at his command. However, upon noticing that I was fighting against my frenzy instinct and controlling the power, Naito canceled his special move. I was proud that I had controlled the power, but I fell to the ground because I had just used up too much energy. Naito couldn't believe that I not only controlled my power but also suppressed the frenzy state, something not everyone could do. He asked me how the hell I did that, but I countered by telling him to accept me as his subordinate to unlock the answer. Naito said he would think about it, and I decided to take that as an agreement. I said that when Naito talked about blood control, I didn't understand, but when I saw him cut his thumb and use the blood to create a weapon, I got an idea. I figured that since we were both Oni, I just needed to mimic him, and surprisingly, it worked. Although I didn't understand the details, I just let my hand bleed while internally screaming at it to form a weapon. I was still excited that my gamble had paid off and asked Naito what he thought of it. Naito thought that was complete nonsense because things don't work that way. In his experience, foolish and emotional teenagers like me find it very difficult to control their blood, while rational and calm people like him have the best chance of using their power correctly. He thought that I didn't listen to reason, nor did I let the frenzy mode control me, and I could use my raw instinct to force the power to obey. He thought it was a very crude method, but it could also yield an explosive amount of power. He started wondering what to do with this unique case when suddenly I said that I needed the power to avenge my father and kill his murderer. I told Naito that if he took me as his subordinate and taught me everything, I would become useful to him. However, Naito refused to consider that possibility. He turned his umbrella into a spear, telling me that people like me were a danger to society because I didn't even know I could control my power and just took a gamble. He said he couldn't accept me as a subordinate, and then acted as if he would stab me with the spear, but only stabbed the floor near my head. He told me that he would not accept me as a subordinate, but as a student, and that was really confusing to me because I thought both were the same. Naito told me that I had barely passed the test, but he would give me a chance to prove myself. I didn't understand what was happening, so Naito decided to start with the basics. He told me that we were on an island called the Threshold of Hell, which was historically known as Onigashima. It's the place where Momotaro originally massacred demons, but now it's a place where Oni can live safely. In the center of the island, there is Resetsu Academy, a military school that trains Oni to fight against the Momotaro agency. I freaked out when I learned I was on an island, but Naito poked me in the face, saying it didn't matter. The most important part was that Resetsu Academy would teach me everything from general education, Oni blood control, fighting techniques, and the history between Momotaro and Oni. Naito was my homeroom teacher, and he elaborated on how they work at the academy, but it was too much for my pea-sized brain. I didn't even care about that, because all I wanted to know was whether I could become strong enough to avenge my father. Naito couldn't guarantee anything, but he told me that if I couldn't become strong enough to fight the Momotaro agency, I would be expelled. Soon, I was in uniform and excited to go to a different kind of school, but Naito warned that others had also passed the test this year and that I was probably the least skilled among them. Suddenly, I remembered my father and asked Naito where his body was. Naito replied that they were keeping him in the morgue because they wanted me to arrange the funeral according to my beliefs. I was slightly saddened thinking about my father's death, and Naito told me that being a moping idiot was a waste of time and I should focus on becoming stronger so I could get revenge. I said that he seemed like a good person too, and that embarrassed Naito, who quickly slid away and told me that if I didn't get to class before him, I would be expelled. Somehow I caught up to him, and while I wondered how I should enter the class to make the coolest entrance, Nairo simply kicked me flying through the door. I felt like I owed a debt of coolness because the entrance was anything but cool, and I asked the masked boy named Jin for some tissue to wipe my nosebleed. Jin turned out to be even cooler than our teacher, and he told me not to talk to him again. I got mad and started teasing him for not having horns yet. Jin simply grew his horns, saying that only foolish recruits who couldn't control their horns boasted about them all day. This comment offended another guy named Akari, who also couldn't control his horns. Things started getting tense in the classroom as I walked over and confronted Jin. However, before things could get violent, Naito suddenly appeared behind us, and I found myself sitting right next to Jin without realizing when. Jin was equally shocked, but Naito had no time to waste on what his students thought. He said that for the first lesson, we would be playing tag. He took all the students into the forest, saying we had 1 hour to return to the school while avoiding being caught by him. Naito then declared that anyone who didn't return to school within the time limit would be expelled. and he didn't care about my objections. Then he told the students that they were free to use their powers and that he would only use his own power in case someone went berserk. Jin confidently said that the teacher might be killed if he didn't use his power, and Naito had no problem with that. Instead, he said that if someone managed to kill him, they would graduate immediately, and then they could join any squad they wanted to fight the Momotaro Agency. He then said that the school was here to prepare us for real-life challenges, and that he would test us at every turn. He asked everyone if they were ready, and I replied that I would do my best and pass the tests. Naito then revealed that there was another rule, and pulled out 2 balls that were even smaller than mine. He told the students that they needed to have a ball when they came to the academy to pass this test, and then suddenly threw them into the restricted area. The students thought that since there were only 2 balls, they would have to fight for them. But then Naito revealed that they would be split into teams. The first team had me along with Jin and the shy, pink-haired girl Homare. The second team had the delinquent Ducati and the bookworm Guji, while the third team had the anxious Rokiro and Kuina, who seemed the most confident of those present. Naito told the 3 teams that he would enter the restricted area 15 minutes after them, so they would have a head start. But I interrupted him, saying I didn't want to be teamed up with the weird masked guy. Naito told me I would be expelled if I couldn't do teamwork, and I was forced to retract my statement. Afterward, Homare politely introduced herself to me, who had never had any feminine interaction my entire life. I instantly felt nervous in my stomach seeing Homare approach, and I confidently told her I would protect her. She blushed hearing this and told me I didn't have to go that far, because all she wanted was not to get in my way. Next, she went to introduce herself to Jin, but he was such a Tate McRae fan that he didn't even acknowledge her. Homare's low self-esteem flared up, and she started crying and apologizing for talking to him. I started scolding Jin for hurting the girl's feelings, and then I quickly went to comfort her, telling her she shouldn't ruin her cute appearance by crying. Then I turned back to mock Jin, but the Tate fan told me not to be a beta simp anymore. Naito interrupted our argument and told us to go inside, because we didn't have all day. Jin and I immediately ran into the Forbidden Forest, and after a while of looking around aimlessly, Homare followed us too. Inside, Jin started jumping across branches like a ninja from Naruto, thinking about how killing Naito would help him graduate and gain the right to join any squad he wanted. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to go to the front lines and face his greatest enemy once more. But then suddenly, I tried to attack him from behind, pulling him out of his train of thought. Jin asked if I was crazy, and I replied that I would prove I was stronger than him. Jin was also ready for a fight, and he took off his mask, revealing gruesome scars around his mouth. I was horrified, but I said that only the weak showed off old scars, but Jin was not fooled by my taunts. He simply removed his gloves, revealing hands also covered in stitches. He ripped one of the stitches open to let blood flow out and transformed it into circular saw blade. I was shocked to see this because I thought the author of Chainsaw Man would sue us for copying his idea. Jin told me not to waste any more time and to run if I was scared, but I replied that if I ran away now, I wouldn't be able to avenge my father's death. Jin was startled to hear that, but then he suddenly became intimidating when he told me that we would never be able to understand each other. I told him I didn't want to understand him in the first place, and bit my thumb to draw blood. However, this time I failed to turn it into a gun and panicked, wondering exactly what I should do to make it work. I decided to fight back with a stick because it was the only option I had. But I soon realized I was no match for Jin, who could cut down trees with just one slash of his chainsaw arm. Meanwhile, Homare was trying to find the 2 boys when she suddenly heard trees crashing down to the ground. She instantly panicked, and her inferiority complex flared up, thinking she wasn't fit to be in a place like this. However, she cheered up slightly, thinking I had called her cute, and she decided to go look for me, not realizing she was just a few steps away from one of the balls. At the same time, I was trying to fight Jin with my bare hands. Jin wasn't even using his chainsaw power, and he could still easily defeat me. I kept wondering how he could control his power so easily, but then I realized that Jin's abilities were different from my tornadoes. I lost concentration thinking about the true nature of our abilities, and Jin was able to knock me down with just one punch. I felt disappointed by this, and Jin decided to let the loser cry in peace. However, just as he started walking away, I stood up, telling him the fight wasn't over. Jin angrily launched a saw blade towards me, and right at that moment, Homare arrived. Thanks to her extreme self-preservation instinct, she didn't even realize she was walking straight into the line of fire. I panicked seeing this, and luckily, I managed to pull her to safety, although I sustained minor injuries. I quickly got off Homare and told Jin to apologize to her. But Jin replied that if she died from his weak attack, it was her fault. I was furious because of this. But then suddenly, I heard Homare muttering, "I'm sorry," like a prayer. I told her it wasn't her fault, but Homare was in a daze, and she suddenly started having a nosebleed. The blood slowly formed into the shape of a giant, and both Jin and I panicked, wondering what the hell this was in the name of Attack on Titan. Homare told us both to run because her Titan goddess would kill us. As soon as she finished speaking, the Titan goddess punched the ground with full force, and I barely managed to dodge her attack. Jin, on the other hand, jumped straight towards the Titan goddess to fight back, but his saw blades couldn't inflict much damage on her colossal body. I asked Homare if she could stop it, and she apologized because she couldn't do anything. She suddenly collapsed after losing too much blood, and I decided to take her away from the female Titan to help her. However, I was shocked to see the Titan protecting her, and even Jin wondered if Homare's blood had a will of its own. Suddenly, the female Titan began violently spraying blood, and while Jin hid behind a rock, I took the full brunt of the attack. Homare was crying, demanding the female Titan stop, calling her sister, and I stood up confused, not understanding what she meant. Homare once again asked me to run away, but I refused, saying she would die from blood loss if I didn't help her, and I didn't want to see anyone else die in front of me again. Suddenly, the female Titan let out a powerful roar, its shockwave reaching the remaining students outside the forest. Naito observed everything from the treetop, and he decided to let Jin and me try to handle Homare's blood release ability before he intervened. Back at the battle site, I tried to injure myself to draw blood and use it as a weapon, but it didn't happen. The female Titan attacked me and I dodged, but then she scooped up some rocks from the ground and hurled them at me. I was hit and thrown away, but what hurt the most was how miserably weak I was right now. I had never lost a fight before, but now I was just a useless kid. I started crying out of frustration, but then Jin stepped out to join the fight and told me to go home if I was going to cry like a girl. I got angry and told him I just had sweat leaking from my eyes. But Jin had no time for that. He ripped open his wounds again, and this time, he created 2 different types of chainsaws on each arm. The damage he sustained from the female Titan's previous attack was still affecting him, but he was determined to win every fight in front of him. Naito watched only from afar, and he was impressed that Jin could create 2 types of weapons at once. He started explaining how Oni blood can transform into any shape they imagine, but it is often influenced by their past trauma, preferences, and experience. Meanwhile, Jin rushed towards the female Titan, using the circular saws to climb up. He then tried to imitate Levi Ackerman by attacking the nape of the female Titan's neck, but she sacrificed an arm to defend herself. While he was fighting the female Titan, I screamed at my hand to create something. I wondered why I couldn't generate a weapon when Jin could. But then suddenly, I realized that Jin only created things for cutting. And even Homare had a personal connection to her female Titan. I thought I might be able to create guns because I liked them more than the average American. And I suddenly figured out how to control my power. On the other side, Jin was struggling to fight the female Titan, who suddenly let out a loud roar that ruptured his eardrums. He lost his balance and thought he was about to die. And even Naito was preparing to intervene. But then I declared that I would now join the fight. I aimed a powerful grenade launcher at the female Titan, and Naito was impressed that I had figured it out. I was excited to try out my new weapon, but then the female Titan attacked me. I dodged her attack and then shot a grenade at her, instantly blowing her away, and both Jin and Naito were stunned by my power. The female Titan began to disappear as her fragments scattered everywhere and Homare lay unconscious. Meanwhile, Jin was still amazed by my firepower when suddenly blood rained down. However, it was only blood suspended in the air from my previous attack, and it soon turned into regular rain. Jin realized that my attack didn't just kill the female Titan, but also changed the weather. I hadn't thought about that at all. I started walking towards Homare to see if she was okay, but then my vision blurred, and I collapsed onto the ground, unable to move. Just then Naito arrived and told me that I had just released a monstrous amount of blood, which was why my body had no strength left. I told the teacher that I could still go on and somehow forced myself to stand up, but that didn't last even 5 seconds, and I collapsed onto the ground once again. Naito called me a novice who couldn't control his power, but he realized that my power went beyond anything he had ever seen. He told me that if I used too much blood, I could even die, and that made me worry about Homare instead of myself. I asked Naito to check on her since she might have used a lot of blood, and I was fine being checked after her. Naito didn't expect me to be worried about someone else when I was in such a critical condition myself. But just as he was about to help us, Jin suddenly attacked him. Fortunately, Naito's reflexes were fast enough to block the attack, and he pushed Jin back, who said they didn't need to worry about losers. Naito asked him what would happen if Homare died, because she couldn't get emergency help, and Jin replied that it was none of his business. Naito felt disgusted upon hearing that, and made it clear to Jin that he hated selfish bastards like him. Jin didn't care about that either, and just asked Naito to confirm that he could graduate if he killed him. Naito promised that he was telling the truth, and that was enough for Jin to rush straight at him. Naito blocked his blood chainsaw blade with his umbrella, which was made of the same material as the Hulk's pants because it was indestructible. He then pressed a button to release a smoke screen, and Jin thought he was trying to take him down with a surprise attack. He was confident that he could kill Naito as soon as he stepped into his attack range, but the next moment he was hit by several lightning-fast bullets. He immediately hid behind a tree, and Naito continued firing rubber bullets from his multifunctional umbrella towards him, saying that the bullets wouldn't kill him, but they would hurt like hell. He also deliberately aimed for Jin's previously injured hand for maximum damage. Jin realized that Naito intended to keep a safe distance between them because he thought Jin could only use close-range weapons. However, he had a few secret tricks for times like these, and he immediately left cover behind the tree, dodging Naito's rounds before launching several flying blades at him. Naito dodged them easily, but he was surprised that Jin had a counterattack for enemies who could fight out of his range. Jin continued attacking him, and then appeared behind him mid-air, thinking that he wouldn't be able to defend himself anymore. However, Naito just threw a bomb at him, and Jin panicked. Luckily, it was just another harmless smoke bomb, and Jin thought Naito would shoot him again from afar. That was why he didn't even anticipate Naito rushing in from behind and delivering a punch that cracked his spine. Naito lectured him about being too certain of his predictions in a fight because it made him vulnerable to surprise attacks. Jin was too badly injured and exhausted to move, but he kept trying, and Naito had to flip his umbrella upside down and use it as a cage to contain him. Jin kept trying to get out of the umbrella, and Naito asked if he was too desperate to meet his father. He suddenly went silent upon hearing this, and then asked Naito how he knew about that. Naito replied that he had checked his file, so he knew a few things about him, including that his father was a Momotaro. While every cell in Jin's body revolted upon hearing this, I was shocked to learn that we both shared similar pasts. Jin, however, was filled with hatred, as he admitted his father was a Momotaro, and that bastard had stolen everything from him. He had killed his family and then experimented on him, leaving scars all over his body. Jin recalled surviving on garbage and hatred towards his father. He swore he would kill him with his own hands, even if it cost him his life. In a fit of rage, Jin suddenly had a burst of power, allowing him to rip out the cage holding him down. However, before he could do anything, Naito grabbed his face and then slammed him to the ground, calling him a stupid kid. The teacher told him that if he died while pursuing his dreams, he was a fool who would never be able to achieve them. The teacher told him to live for the goal of making his dreams a reality, even if it meant accepting defeat and humiliation. Jin finally stopped moving after that, and then Naito called the school to send a nurse because he had an injured student here. He informed the school that Homare had to withdraw from this test due to blood loss, and that Jin had also been restrained. I, on the other hand, was still standing, and Naito told me that I had less than 6 minutes left before the time ran out. He held one of the balls in his hand, and told me that I could try to take it from him or find the remaining ball within 5 minutes and reach the school. I said that wasn't fair, but I had no choice but to play by Naito's rules. He immediately ran away, and I decided to chase him to see what he would do. Meanwhile, Jin was sitting silently where he was tied to a tree when I suddenly emerged from the nearby bushes. I walked up to Jin and said I would free him, but in return, he would have to cooperate with me. Jin was shocked by the proposal, and I said that neither of us could defeat Naito alone, but if we cooperated, we would have a chance. Jin refused, saying that being rescued by an idiot would diminish his self-respect, and I didn't even bother arguing about the fact that I was an idiot. I asked Jin if his pride was more important than his goal, because he couldn't achieve his goal just by sitting here. Jin asked me why I cared, and I revealed that my father was also a Momotaro. Jin was shocked to hear this, and then I used the old Naruto trick on him, saying that we were the same. Meanwhile, Naito was looking for me, and since he couldn't find me, he suspected I had gone back. Just then, he saw me running away while cursing Jin and decided to corner me immediately. I stopped just as Naito jumped in, telling me I was running out of time while boasting about his ball. I started cursing Jin in my head, not because he wasn't helping me, but because despite being rescued, he still wanted to be the one in command. Just then, Jin leaped onto Naito from above, aiming for the ball, but the teacher easily dodged. However, that was just a feint, and Jin's real move was throwing a rock tied to a rope at Naito. The rope quickly wrapped around the teacher, tying him up, and then I caught the other end. Jin and I started pulling Naito with all our might, but he dug his heels into the ground, quite certain that we didn't have enough stamina to beat him. Suddenly, Jin shot a blood blade at Naito, forcing him to dodge, and he lost his balance in the effort of doing so. That was enough for me, who rushed towards him and knocked the ball out of his hands. The ball fell near Jin, and Naito was quite certain that if Jin tried to take it to the academy, I would try to steal it from him. He planned to take it from us while we fought, but to his surprise, I told Jin to take the ball and run. Jin did exactly that, and I continued cheering him on excitedly. I told Naito that we had taken the ball from him, but then Naito reminded me that only the person who brought the ball to the academy passed, and at this speed, that person would only be Jin. I was stunned by the realization, and Naito realized that I was a complete idiot, failing to consider the pros and cons before acting. I quickly regretted my decision and shouted for Jin to come back, but he was too far away to hear me now. Jin was certain he could get back to the academy in time at this speed, but then he remembered that this wouldn't have been possible without my help, and suddenly he couldn't just abandon me. He turned around and ran back towards me, who was dumbfounded, and asked if he was directionally challenged like Zoro. Jin told me to shut up because the only reason he was doing this was that he didn't want to owe his success to an idiot. He would rather fail and achieve the goal on his own, and that was why he asked me to take the ball and go to the academy. However, just as we were about to reach each other, a small pink creature ran towards us at very high speed and stopped right between us. Naito immediately paused the test, telling us not to fight while Muku, their high-speed delivery pet, was there with them. He knew that Muku was only dispatched during an emergency, and he activated the radio on its back to receive a request for support from the Kyoto branch, which was under attack by the Momotaro agency. Outside the testing area, the remaining students were patiently waiting their turn, thinking that I and the others had failed because the time limit was over. However, Naito returned with me and Jin shortly after, telling the other students that the Kyoto branch was in serious danger and requesting support. Therefore, they would go there instead of conducting the test. They immediately boarded a boat and headed for the Kyoto branch. And the students had mixed feelings about having to go to a real battlefield so quickly. However, Naito told them they wouldn't be fighting, and that he only needed them to support the actual warriors. Soon, they arrived in Kyoto, and Naito led them to the area surrounding a famous temple, saying that the Oni agency's base was right beneath it. He took the students to a normal-looking restaurant, where a terrifying old woman greeted them. When they reached the sitting room, the old woman revealed a secret staircase beneath the floor that would lead them to their destination. Meanwhile, at a different location, Tsubakiri, a captain of the Momotaro agency, had just finished exterminating an Oni unit. He called them a bunch of maggots pretending to be soldiers, and his vice captain, Yumogi, told him that he had gone overboard again. She complained about all the mess he had caused, because it would be a huge effort to clean it up. And Tsubakiri replied that he just found it too irritating to see maggots. He wished they had faced a female Oni instead, because they are tough and can tolerate pain better than males, which made them a good choice for his experiments. Yumogi told him that his experiments were disgusting, and that she hated them, especially the thing walking towards them. Tsubakiri told her not to be cold toward his favorite creation, a blend of a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. He named it Ugly, and that was the only thing Yumogi could agree with him on. Tsubakiri said that Ugly was his crucial research specimen, as well as a loyal member of their anti-Oni biological weapon team. Yumogi's mother said that their job was to eliminate dangerous Oni and save civilians, and he should contribute more to that instead of wasting time on bizarre research. Tsubakiri told her that Oni blood was a truly fascinating substance, and that he was trying his best to help in his own way. He declared that if they could learn to control Oni blood itself, it would definitely greatly help the Momotaro agency. And even better, if they could turn the healing factor of Oni blood into medicine, they could become richer than Elaine, Jeff, and Zuck combined. Yumogi reminded him that even Momotaros possessed similar abilities, and Tsubakiri said that it wasn't wise to experiment on humans. However, Oni were maggots in his eyes, and he said they should experiment on them because simply killing them was a waste. A terrified Oni child heard all this while hiding behind the corner, and the boy tried his best to stay silent. Just as he heard the footsteps of the two Momotaro agents walking away from him, the boy sighed in relief, and that turned out to be his fatal mistake because Tsubakiri had heard it and immediately came to his location. The child panicked, and Tsubakiri decided to take him to the lab. Yumogi told him that she would knock him out so he wouldn't cause trouble. But while she was trying to put the boy to sleep without anesthesia, a drop of blood splattered onto Tsubakiri's coat. Yumogi realized that this meant trouble, not for her, but for the Oni child. Tsubakiri walked up to the boy and started kicking him, saying that even though he was fascinated by Oni blood, it was a filthy substance and he would not tolerate it on his uniform. He then asked the boy if his parents lived nearby and if they were part of the group he had just killed. When he didn't get an answer, he lifted the corpses of the nearby Oni to show the boy and asked if his parents were among them. The child was too terrified to speak, and Tsubakiri decided to crush the boy with the corpses. Yumogi shuddered at this. Because of all the Momotaro abilities she had seen, Tsubakiri's was the most twisted. The black mist emanating from their bodies was actually a special type of bacteria living in their blood, and they could use it to create weapons. However, Tsubakiri could use the bacteria to control corpses, and she still couldn't get used to that. Soon, Tsubakiri was done killing the boy, and he told Ugly to eat the giant Oni dumpling, while they went to look for more maggots to kill. On the other hand, Shin and the other students were walking through a wide tunnel, and Naito told them that some stores in the area had tunnel entrances leading to their base. They soon arrived at the gate leading to the space directly beneath Uruta Temple, which was designed like a traditional Japanese house. The students couldn't believe their eyes when Naito told them that this was the headquarters of the Kyoto division of the Oni agency. Just then, a doctor walked out of a room complaining about all the work he had to do, but his demeanor suddenly changed when he saw Naito. The doctor greeted him cheerfully and then started fixing his hair when he noticed the beautiful blonde girl. She rejected him immediately, but that didn't break the heart of the admirer, as he was quite used to being rejected. Shin asked who this clown was, and Naito introduced him as Kyoa, the commander of the support unit at the Kyoto base. Kyoa added that he and Naito were classmates at the academy, but Naito had no time for his small talk. He decided to head to the front line immediately, and Shin begged the teacher to let him come along. The other students also preferred to go with him rather than deal with a weirdo like Kyoa, but Naito wouldn't listen to them. The teacher told Kyoa to use these kids as he wished before leaving. And just then, the nurse told Kyoa to go back inside and do his job. She recognized the students from the academy and told them to change immediately because they needed all the help they could get. They quickly put on assistant nurse uniforms and then arrived at the field hospital where dozens of injured Oni were screaming in pain. One of them had just been brought in, and he had lost both legs along with several other life-threatening injuries. I was horrified to see his condition, and the nurse also said that he had 3 minutes at most to live. Kyoa just smiled at him and said that they wouldn't let him die, and I yelled in his face, demanding that he stop making such reckless and callous promises. Kyoa appreciated my honesty and kindness, but told me that he was an important figure here, and he decided to show the kids how real support work is done. At another location, Tsubakiri and Yumogi had just finished dealing with the captain and vice captain of another group. The remaining Oni were now terrified of them, and Tsubakiri was disappointed that he would have to deal with another bunch of small fry when he was anticipating a strong opponent. Well, his wish was instantly granted when Naito arrived and quickly activated his ability. Tsubakiri was overjoyed to see him, but Naito didn't give him a chance to celebrate for long as he instantly launched his lethal blow at him. The Oni were truly happy that Naito had arrived to save them, but Tsubakiri was completely unharmed from the previous attack because he had used the corpses of the dead Oni captain and vice captain as his meat shields. It turns out he knew Naito from before, and he spoke to him as if they were old friends. He asked him what he was doing in Kyoto since it wasn't his territory. Tsubakiri then remarked that he had heard about a location where Oni and Kyoto were concentrated, and if he could just wipe that place out, the whole issue would be solved. Naito kept a poker face, as he said that he knew nothing about that, and Tsubakiri replied that he would give up if even Naito claimed that the place wasn't real. He then said that he would go sightseeing around the big temple instead, and Naito panicked internally because he knew that Tsubakiri had a very sharp instinct. He decided to stop him right here and prepared for a serious fight. Back at headquarters, Kyo was sticking multiple tubes of blood into his body, and I asked if they shouldn't be giving that blood to the injured instead. The nurse told me to shut up and watch as Kyoa approached the most severely injured man. He asked him if he wanted his arms or legs regrown because he couldn't afford both right now. The man summoned all his strength to say that he wanted his arms so he could hug his children again. Kyoa promised that he would be able to do that, but the process would be very painful. He then slit his wrist to pour blood into the injured man's mouth, proclaiming that it helped boost a regular Oni's healing ability many times over. As soon as his blood started to take effect, the man started screaming in agony, and the nurse told the students to hold him down. The others and I instantly followed her command and in the meantime, she told others to fetch more blood from the next room. Soon after, something started poking through the man's bandaged arm, and I shuddered when I saw that something resembled human fingers. The other students also backed away, and then suddenly the injured man regrew his arms, and even the severe burns on his chest were completely healed. I instantly went up to Kyoa asking if they could regenerate his legs, and he affirmed, but added that they needed to do it over time and use small doses of his blood because he had already consumed too much. The injured man might develop an immunity if he drinks more. Kyoa then went up to the patient, telling him that he would be retired from the combat unit now, but he could join the support unit to help others. He said that with a pair of prosthetic legs, he would soon be playing with his children, and the man burst into tears upon hearing that. Kyoa then turned to the students, telling them that they could be in this guy's position in the future. He understood that pursuing glory and building character could only be done on the front lines, but he reminded them that those on the front lines could only fight bravely because someone had their back. And that was the support unit. I and a few others were now truly impressed with him, and we told him that we were ready to help him in any way possible. Kyoa told me that he needed my help in another matter, and took me to meet a depressed little girl named Mei, who was brought in yesterday after the Momotaro agency attacked her. Her parents were still missing, and Kyoa wanted to use my kindness to make her feel better. I accepted the job and tried talking to the girl, who gradually opened up to me. I asked her about school, and she said that she had never been to school. As I was wondering if she was a delinquent child like me, the support unit brought back several bodies from the battlefield, and Mei's parents were among them. The girl started crying hysterically when she saw them, and Kyoa said that he couldn't get used to such heartbreaking scenes even after all these years. However, there was a deeper and more sinister plan behind the corpses that no one realized. Tsubakiri told Naito that he had laced some Oni corpses with his bacteria. He was fully aware that the support unit would take them to their base for a proper funeral, and then he could remotely control the corpses and destroy the base. Naito was shocked to hear this, and Tsubakiri decided to test if his plan was working. He reanimated Mei's father's corpse while Kyoa and I were distracted, and the girl was overjoyed, thinking that he was still alive. However, he started choking the girl on Tsubakiri's command, but Kyoa and I quickly realized what was happening. Kyoa realized this was Tsubakiri's ability, and he instantly told me to cover Mei's eyes. I followed the command, and then Kyoa stabbed 2 sharp scalpels into the man's brain, neutralizing him. Mei started crying when I let her see what happened to her father. And then Kyoa realized that there might be more zombie puppets here like this one. However, he realized too late because the zombie puppets had already started moving, and Mei's mother suddenly stood up and attacked me before I could react. She started choking me, and Kyoa decided to neutralize her quickly. But before he could get his scalpel out, more zombies attacked from behind, restraining him. I couldn't do anything either, and the oxygen supply to my brain was gradually cut off, causing me to lose consciousness. The same thing happened all over the headquarters, and the zombies started attacking the support personnel who had carried them earlier. The support personnel weren't even trained to fight, and due to the surprise attack, they were easy targets for the zombies to subdue. At the same time, the zombies broke into the room where all the critical patients were being treated. They attacked the patients and medical staff, and no one knew how to handle the situation. Back in the other room, I somehow still maintained consciousness, as Mei cried and begged her mother to let go of me. I told the girl to stay away from that zombie because it wasn't her mother. But Mei didn't even listen to me. Kyoa tried to help me, but the zombies took him down. Seeing that no one was coming to my aid, I pulled a Glock out of my buttock. It turns out Naito had given me the gun on the boat, telling me that I wasn't skilled enough yet to control my blood. So if I needed to fight, I should use a weapon I was familiar with. He also told me that the gun contained my blood bullets instead of regular ones, and it would be much stronger. If there was ever a time to use the gun, it was now. And I first pulled Mei close, so she wouldn't have to witness the bloodshed that was about to happen. Then, I pointed the gun at the zombie woman's head and pulled the trigger, finishing her off. I then caught my breath, while Kyoa was still being crushed by 3 zombies. Luckily, I recovered quickly and shot a hole in each zombie's head before helping Kyoa up. Kyoa complained that the support unit wasn't ready for such situations, and he tasked me with cleaning up this mess while he evacuated the patients. In the main hall, the remaining students were fighting the zombies barehanded because they were uncertain about the situation. They wondered how to put the zombies down permanently since they kept getting up no matter how badly injured they were. And right then, Kyoa and I arrived. I told everyone to aim for the brain, because that was the only way to stop the zombies. I immediately started shooting at the heads in every direction, and Jin was the first one to follow suit. Jin tore open his stitches and performed some surgery on the zombies in front of him, and the others gradually realized what they needed to do. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Kyo ordered the support staff to evacuate the patients and treat anyone newly injured. Meanwhile, I continued firing at the zombies as if my gun had infinite ammo, but I thought that killing the dead was the most disgusting thing I had ever done in my life. I started taking a psychological toll, thinking that every zombie I killed used to be a person with a family and friends who cared about them. On the other hand, Naito was still in a standoff with Tsubakiri. He decided to take him down in close combat, but Tsubakiri used 3 dead Oni as shields. Naito was enraged, but then he noticed the ugly monster beside him, ready to launch a devastating blow. He somehow managed to dodge the attack at the last second, but Ugly crushed the 3 Oni instead. Naito wasn't happy about this, and Tsubakiri told him that he should be glad these pests infecting the world were dead. Naito told him that no matter how strong he was, he couldn't win every battle alone, but Tsubakiri found that ironic, coming from another loner. His point was proven within seconds when the small fry Oni offered him support, but he told them to evacuate to safety because they would only get in his way. Tsubakiri told him that no one was leaving this place, and he ordered his assistant, Yumogi, to do her job. Yumogi's mother stepped up and used her power, creating an impenetrable barrier around Naito and the other Oni, locking them in place. Tsubakiri told Naito that he couldn't leave this barrier until Yumogi allowed it, and in the meantime, he would walk around the Oni headquarters. Naito panicked when Tsubakiri revealed that he had planted transmitters on all the Oni corpses, and that they had all gathered right beneath the Aruta temple. So that must definitely be the Oni headquarters. Tsubakiri started heading towards the temple, and he ordered Yumogi to send an Ugly inside the barrier. She allowed the creature into her barrier, and Naito prepared to fight it. However, Tsubakiri said that this creature was mass-produced, so sacrificing it was fine. He snapped his fingers, and the Ugly's belly suddenly started inflating. Naito realized it was about to self-destruct and told everyone to get down. But there wasn't enough room in the small room for them to avoid the blast, which was strong enough to break Momoga's barrier and destroy the nearby buildings. Yumogi asked if they should check again to make sure Naito was dead, but Tsubakiri told her there was too much smoke and he didn't want to get his uniform dirty. That turned out to be a mistake, because although unconscious, Naito seemed to have no major visible injuries. Back at the headquarters, I and the others finally managed to defeat all the zombies, and Kyowa also transported the patients to a safer location. He thought their problems were solved, but then he noticed Mei staring blankly at the corpses of her parents. He went to comfort her and I joined him. I apologized to Mei for shooting her mother, but she coldly replied that it was fine. I was shocked by her reaction, but Mei went on to say that she always had to run from place to place, hiding from a threat she didn't even know about. She had no friends and couldn't even go to school, and she had the thought that something like this would happen someday. She put on a fake smile, telling me not to worry about her, and my heart broke hearing this. I recalled my own childhood and how I always admired superheroes. In their folktales, Momotaro was considered the hero, while Oni was the villain. I asked if this was how the heroes in fairy tales operated. I suddenly hugged Mei, declaring that I would become a villain and crush all heroes. I promised Mei that I would create a world where she could smile again, and she didn't know how to respond. Soon after, Kyowa brought Jin along for support, as he explained the plan to cremate the bodies of the deceased Oni, but Jin wasn't interested in his rambling. Meanwhile, the remaining students were dragging the bodies to take them to the crematorium, but the smug bookworm named Guji seemed to have other thoughts. Hikari told him to stop being lazy and help out, and Guji said he had a hypothesis. Since they had been attacked here, he believed the headquarters wasn't as safe as they thought, and they might be attacked again. Guji's ability was more suited for reconnaissance, so he decided to stand guard. He immediately cut his thumb and let the blood drip onto the ground, creating a radar that could sense any living creature within a 5 kilometers radius, and he could even confirm if they were Momotaro. Hikari was really impressed with his ability when Guji suddenly detected some hostiles approaching their base. The signals came from Tsubakiri and Yumogi, who had arrived at the store that used to be the secret passageway to the Oni headquarters. The old woman there was dead, and Yumogi had also found the tunnel entrance. While she was checking it, Tsubakiri called the Momotaro agency, asking them to send some mass-produced uglies to his location, as well as a special-purpose ugly he had created himself. He also requested information about some high-risk Oni, whose name he had forgotten, and then prepared to go inside. Yumogi told him that the area looked vast, and there might be a lot of Oni there, so they needed to be careful. She suggested throwing some poisonous gas inside to make their job easier. But just then, Tsubakiri received the file of that high-risk Oni, who turned out to be none other than me. He told Yumogi that they couldn't use poison now because he wanted me alive. She was surprised to hear this, and Tsubakiri said that I was truly special for an Oni, and he couldn't miss the opportunity to experiment on me. Meanwhile, Kyowa showed Jin the crematorium where they were burning all their dead friends. Jin was a bit stunned to see it, and Kyowa said that once the fight with the Momotaro agency started, a lot of people would die. He warned Jin about the dangers of the path he was embarking on, but told him not to worry too much, because he could heal from almost anything. Then, he suddenly became overly friendly with Jin, and asked if he had a girlfriend yet. Jin completely ignored the weird guy, and walked away. And as Kyowa chased after him, he suddenly sensed someone approaching from behind. He turned around just in time to be stabbed by Tsubakiri, who was actually aiming for his back but missed. Kyowa was too surprised to react, but Jin instinctively launched his blood blades to counter the enemy. However, before he could do anything, Yumogi appeared behind him, locking his blades in her black prison and then breaking his arm. Jin screamed in pain, but the black prison around his arm didn't hold for long. He tried to focus on the enemy despite the pain. Realizing they were in the worst possible situation, both he and Kyowa were injured, and he knew nothing about the enemies. However, Kyowa was quite calm even in this situation, and he told Jin to quickly go back and inform everyone about the enemy attack while he held off the two Momotaro. Jin followed his orders, promising to bring reinforcements, and Kyowa then shifted his focus to the two enemies in front. Tsubakiri told Yumogi to do her work, and she created a massive barrier around the entire headquarters. At this point, Kyowa realized that her ability was to create barriers using her bacteria, and she intended to make sure no one could escape the headquarters alive. Kyowa began calculating his options because he couldn't fight, and he didn't think the students were strong enough to defeat the dangerous opponents in front of him. He believed reinforcements wouldn't arrive soon, and that simply meant he would die. Suddenly, Tsubakiri asked him if he knew me, and Kyowa realized that things were more complicated than he thought. He decided to fight his best and pulled out a poison syringe from his coat. However, before he had a chance to use it, Tsubakiri slashed his neck, leaving a deep gash. Kyowa panicked because he couldn't even see him coming, and he fell to the ground as his blood splattered everywhere with high pressure. As Kyowa slowly lost consciousness, he wished that if he was going to die, Mami Yumogi would be the one to finish him. Tsubakiri wouldn't grant his wish, and he thought Kyowa was dead after his single attack. He decided to control his corpse through his bacteria, but suddenly stopped when he sensed the ugly creatures outside the barrier. He told Yumogi to let them in, and she allowed the uglies entry. Tsubakiri asked them if they had brought what he requested, and one of them produced a large box. Then, he ordered the uglies to remove the cover, revealing an ornate wooden block. Tsubakiri asked the uglies to carry the box carefully as they searched for him. And at the same time, Jin arrived at the headquarters to warn everyone. He was surprised to find no one nearby, but when he entered the main hall, he found everyone ready to fight. They were relieved to see Jin, but he was confused why they were all gathered in one place. I told him that Guji had used his ability and detected the enemies approaching them, so they acted quickly and evacuated all the patients. However, before the remaining people could escape, a black wall blocked the exit, and now they were stuck here. Some suggested they should find another way out, but the nurse said she had checked everything, and there was no escape. I then asked Jin about Kyowa, but before he could answer my question, an ugly arrived. Everyone was stunned to see such a frightening monster, and they let it pass them towards a random guy who became the monster's meal. While everyone was watching, everyone decided to flee to avoid confronting the monster, and I decided to keep Mei safe by my side. Soon after, Tsubakiri and the others entered the hall and found it empty. He ordered the uglies to place the coffin down and sat on it, instructing Yumogi to capture me alive and kill everyone else. She asked him if he would accompany her, and Tsubakiri refused, saying he had some important thoughts to ponder. Meanwhile, the beautiful blonde Quina was going through some clothes in the restroom to find something she could move better in. Meanwhile, the dramatic guy Io was also in the same room, crying that he was about to die because his heart rate was irregular. Quina told him to exercise if he faints after only running a short distance. Then she covered his face so he wouldn't see her change, and then, ironically, she changed into a skin-tight gym uniform. Rokuro asked her what she planned to do now, and Quina replied that she was going to set a trap. Apparently, he was envious of healthy people when he heard this because he was always afraid of getting sick. Just then, they heard the heavy footsteps of an ugly approaching, and Rokuro panicked, telling Quina that he couldn't fight while so stressed. He pleaded with her to do something, and that suddenly excited the beautiful girl because she loved having complete control. She told Rokuro to hide in the closet as she would take care of everything, and he nervously obeyed her command. Kuina then stood facing the door, waiting for the enemy to arrive. The ugly thing broke through the wall and entered the room. But before fighting, it asked Kuina if she was me. She angrily replied that I was a stupid-looking thug. And upon hearing this, the monster suddenly began attacking her. It knocked over the closet Rohirrim was hiding in, causing him to faint. Meanwhile, Kuina decided to show the monster who was boss once the room was sufficiently wrecked. She bit her thumb, and her blood transformed into boxing gloves around her fists. On the other hand, Jin ran back to Kyoa to check on him, and Ikari was also preparing to confront a monster. At the same time, I focused on hiding to keep Mei safe, and the only place I found was the garden. Meanwhile, Rohirrim woke up and found the room completely silent. He started thinking everything was just a bad dream and decided to come out of the closet. But to his astonishment, he saw the monster's face right in front of him. He panicked, trying to understand the situation, which suddenly became stranger when the monster stood up and advanced toward Kuina obediently. She stroked its face before positioning it and then knocking it down with a powerful punch. Then, she sat on the monster and began delivering F-combo blows to its head until it was unconscious. Rohirrim was afraid of her now, but Kuina enjoyed destroying the monster and then stepping on it while it lay helplessly on the ground. This was thanks to her ability called I Love, which turned enemies stained with her blood into mindless slaves who lost all will to fight against her. When Rohirrim came out of the closet to ask if she really defeated the monster all by herself, Kuina proudly told him that she had told him to leave everything to her. The reason she told him this was not because she was a reliable woman who wanted to take care of everyone, but because she was a psychopath who enjoyed making people so dependent on her that they completely lost their ability to function. And right now, Rohirrim himself had fallen into her trap. He knelt before her, thanking her for saving him, and that suddenly made Kuina's doting tendency skyrocket. She placed a sheet on the ground and tucked Rohirrim in, telling him he didn't need to worry about anything because she would handle everything. He was anxious because she was too close to him, and Kuina noticed that he looked pale and weak. So she decided to go get him food, and Rohirrim panicked even more, thinking this was a trap because there was no way a girl would pay so much attention to him. He started trembling, afraid that she might use him as bait when the next monster arrived, and Kuina started worrying about him even more. Just then, another monster arrived, and Kuina decided to deal with it before returning to her main job of spoiling Rohirrim rotten. She thought this monster was also a weakling and decided to handle it quickly, but the monster turned out to be much stronger than the previous one. It used its arm like a whip to attack her and drilled a hole through the wall behind her. Rohirrim immediately hid in the closet again, and Kuina was furious at the monster for ruining her fun. She jumped at it, activating her power midway, but the monster nonchalantly dodged her punch and then stabbed her shoulder with its bizarre tentacle arm. Kuina somehow escaped it, but the monster then used both arms to tie her up, and she realized she couldn't use her power like this. The monster started pulling her closer, and when she resisted, it just yanked the rope and slammed her into the ceiling. The monster started whipping the muscular girl all around the room, and she was helpless, unable to do anything. Finally, she was slammed onto the ground, and the monster began stepping on her head. Rohirrim was horrified to see this, but that was all this useless person could do. He just stood watching Kuina being tortured and wished someone would come to help her. He didn't even think he could help her because he was a weakling and a coward. But that made him realize that he had become a pathetic loser without even knowing it. He recalled the time when he wasn't a cowardly loser, and it felt like a century had passed since then. Rohirrim grew up in a secluded village where many Oni lived among humans, and a girl named Lulu was his first love. He always tried to impress her by showing how cool and brave he was, even though he was terrified inside. However, with Lulu by his side, he felt he could do anything. Lulu was also always close to him, and they spent most of their time together happily. However, beneath that perfect life, things were not okay. Lulu was sick, and since she was an Oni, she couldn't be taken to a regular doctor. The village's only Oni doctor helped her stabilize and recover. But one day, the Momotaro agency raided the village, and they killed the only doctor. Without him, Lulu's condition worsened, and Rohirrim promised her that he would quickly bring another doctor from a nearby town. He asked her to trust him, because he could do anything for her. And Lulu told him that he was always the coolest person she knew. She asked him to always remain that way, and passed away shortly after. Rohirrim was heartbroken and devastated by this, and soon after, he lost his spark. He no longer had a reason to be brave or confident. His hair turned gray, and he suffered from insomnia. His mental health deteriorated, and he became the loser he is today. As Rohirrim thought about his downfall, the monster transformed its head into a sharp whip to finish Kuina. Rohirrim decided to let it finish the job because he was incapable of saving anyone. However, right then, Lulu's last words flashed in his mind. He remembered that she told him to always be cool, and that suddenly awakened something in him. Just as the monster attacked Kuina to finish her, Rokiro rushed forward, taking her out of harm's way in the nick of time. He realized that if Lulu saw him now, she would be disappointed in him, and he wouldn't let that happen. He looked at the unconscious and wounded Kuina, and thought that she had fought very hard to protect him. And now it was his turn to return the favor. However, he was incredibly scared and didn't even know if his heart could handle the fight, but he thought about Lulu again and reassured himself. He bit his thumb so his blood flowed out, taking the shape of Lulu. Now that his girl was in front of him, Rokiro became calmer and asked her to stay with him, even if he wasn't as cool as she wanted. Lulu, made of blood, hugged him from behind, and the blood slowly began covering his body, washing away his anxiety and fear. However, this was not his true ability, and Rokiro could activate his ability once he was completely confident. His blood enveloped his body, and Rokiro suddenly transformed into some sort of K-pop idol. The monster attacked him after his transformation, but Rokiro easily dodged its attack and then performed several fancy spins in the air before landing behind it. The room was filled with petals made of blood, and each petal was a deadly blade. As the petals stabbed the monster, its body was torn to shreds, but the monster survived the attack. Rokiro, on the other hand, was full of confidence because Lulu was by his side. He challenged the monster to attack him and gracefully dodged everything. Then, he leaped to attack the monster, recalling the summer festivals where he used to dance with Lulu. While lost in memories of his girlfriend, Rokiro evaded the monster's attacks, severed its arm, and forced it to use its legs to fight. He danced around the room, filling it with petal blades, and then launched a fatal combo attack on the monster, chopping it into pieces. On the other hand, I was with May, telling the girl she could relax now because the ugly monsters were gone. However, she was still too depressed over her parents' death and thought maybe she should have died with them. I told her not to think about that, because her parents sacrificed their lives to save her, and if she died, everything would have been in vain. I told her to continue living and fight the despair that was trying to swallow her. I said the first thing she could do was cheer for me as I defeated the bastard who stole her family. Saying that, I stood up and decided to look for Momotaro to defeat them. May, however, believed I couldn't win, and I told her that as long as I didn't give up hope, I would never lose. Meanwhile, Naito regained consciousness after the other Oni woke him up. He knew he had been unconscious for 15 minutes, and the Oni thanked him for taking so much damage to protect them. Naito didn't care about that, and decided to return to the headquarters immediately so he could help his students. Back at the headquarters, I arrived at the main hall, where Tsubakiri was relaxing. When I introduced myself and asked if he was the bastard who turned the corpses into zombies, Tsubakiri cheerfully confirmed. I asked him how he could insult the deceased like that, and Tsubakiri just laughed in my face, saying that Oni were not human, so they had no human rights. I was infuriated by this and pulled out my Glock, pointing it at him, but Tsubakiri just looked at me curiously. On the other hand, Jin rushed to find Kyoa, but was stopped by Yumogi's mother, who told him that the doctor was already dead. She asked Jin if he wanted to avenge his deceased friend, and he replied that he didn't care about Kyoa, but he would gladly kill any Momotaro he encountered. He launched his saw blades, and Yumogi also activated her power to fight back. Jin lunged at her and attacked with all his might, but Yumogi protected herself by creating an impenetrable room around her. She exited the room and dispersed it immediately after blocking the attack, telling Jin that he couldn't touch her with his weak attacks. He took this as a challenge and became even more determined to kill her. Meanwhile, Tsubakiri threw a knife at me to disarm me, telling me to stop playing with toys and use my real power to attack him. I went ballistic over this and decided to blow him away with my full power. I created a powerful rocket launcher, controlling my strength with pure rage and hatred, and told Tsubakiri that I would give my all to destroy him. I thought about how much Mei had suffered because of this bastard, and then about Naito telling me not to use my power because I couldn't control it. I didn't want anyone telling me what to do and what not to do, and I fired the rocket launcher at Tsubakiri, creating a massive explosion. However, Tsubakiri dodged the attack, and I took this opportunity to mock him, asking if he was so scared that he had to run for his life. Anyway, my attention shifted to the coffin, and I wondered what was inside. Tsubakiri answered my question by opening the coffin, and a man dressed in Momotaro clothing stepped out. He declared that he would eliminate all Oni, and I realized that this was another one of Tsubakiri's zombies. I called him a heartless bastard, asking how he could turn his comrade's corpse into puppets, and Tsubakiri sighed in response. He called me a flat-brained idiot who couldn't have any new thoughts of my own. He told me that humans have something called free will, and that his zombie partner here actually volunteered to be a puppet after he died. I couldn't understand why anyone would choose to do that when the Momotaro zombie suddenly used his ability on me. He sent dark shockwaves toward my heart. And in just a few seconds, I found my body so heavy that I couldn't stand up. As the zombie continued to spam his skill, Tsubakiri stated that when other Momotaros turned into zombies, he could use their abilities. His current partner's ability was to mix microbes with oxygen in the air to make it incredibly heavy. Meanwhile, the zombie kept repeating the same phrase about eliminating Oni, and Tsubakiri said that he was also surprised when he first heard it speak. He didn't understand if it was hatred or determination that allowed this walking corpse to speak, but he thought this was the pinnacle of the Momotaro spirit. He continued to press me down with the zombie's power, asking how long I could last against a much stronger foe. Meanwhile, the Oni group and Naito were trying to slash through the black barrier that Yumogi had erected around their headquarters. Their weapons shattered upon hitting the wall, and they wondered if they should try other entrances. However, Naito told them that it would be useless because the barrier was solid everywhere. The minor soldiers asked him if he could destroy the wall, and although Naito was confident he could, he thought it unwise. Currently, there were tourists on the temple above them, and if he destroyed the wall with full force, their lives could be in danger. They panicked because they didn't have the authority to evacuate the tourists, and Naito began to figure out a solution. Just then, the nerdy kid Guji arrived and told Naito that he had found the enemy's signal earlier and had helped the injured evacuate to safety. However, some support staff and most of the students were still inside. Naito realized that they needed to rescue everyone quickly, but before that, they needed to evacuate the tourists first. Just then, some Oni told Naito that they had found a weirdo outside the entrance, and it was just Homare, who had finally woken up. She kept muttering that she shouldn't be in such a beautiful place. But Naito was glad to see her. Suddenly, Guji started acting like an A-grade pervert because he had a thing for girls in school uniforms. He told Homare that he wanted to give her his VC card, and she felt disgusted by this weirdo. Even Naito was shocked, because he thought Guji was the most normal guy among this year's batch of quirky students. Anyway, he realized that there was a way to use Homare's ability to evacuate the tourists, and immediately took her to the forest surrounding the temple. Naito then called Guji, who was inside the temple, and told him that he would create a small earthquake and a landslide so that all the tourists would evacuate. Guji was shocked by this, but Naito reassured him that it would be a small landslide and no one would get hurt. Oni soldiers were deployed throughout the temple to help everyone evacuate, and Naito told Guji to scan the area to confirm that everyone had left after the evacuation. Having said that, he shifted his attention to Homare and asked her to summon the Titan goddess she had previously summoned, because that was what would cause a landslide. She was afraid that she would go berserk, but Naito reassured her that he would handle the situation. Despite the reassurance, Omare was still too scared to use her power, and Naito gave up. He told Guji that the landslide plan was cancelled, and that they needed to find another way. Then he told Homare that she was expelled because he didn't need useless burdens on his team. He started to walk away, but Homare anxiously told him that she was too afraid to use the power she couldn't control. Naito replied that fear was not the problem, but refusing to change was a major one. He knew about the incident Homare accidentally caused in the past, but everyone in his class had a terrible past weighing them down. He told Homare that she needed to be the one to take the first step towards change because no one could help her otherwise. She declared that she wanted to change and suddenly bit her thumb, letting her blood flow out. The blood transformed into the shape of a giant titan and began attacking Naito, who managed to dodge the blows. The heavy punches from the Titan goddess shook the mountain, and Homare started panicking. She apologized for not being able to control her power, but Naito told her it was fine because this was exactly what he wanted right now. Due to the Titan's attacks, the ground began to shake, and massive boulders from the mountain started sliding down. This created panic among the tourists, and the Oni soldiers immediately urged them to evacuate. Once everyone had run off, Guji confirmed it with his radar skill, and Naito decided to stop fooling around with the Titan goddess and knocked out Homare to stop her rampage. At the same time, Jin was fighting Yumogi, who was pushing him back with her black boxes. Jin decided to keep his distance from her, but he didn't realize that she had summoned a box behind him, and he was trapped inside it. Now he couldn't escape the box, and Yumogi decided to give him a slow and painful death. She began to shrink the box, telling Jin that he would be crushed into powder inside it. He told her that he would break it with sheer strength, but Yumogi didn't think that was possible. As the box got smaller, she said that the brain starts panicking when someone is confined in a tight space, and people lose the ability to do anything. She thought the same thing would happen to Jin as the box shrank further. But then she suddenly heard the sound of a sword blade hitting the wall. She thought there was no way he could do that in such a confined space. But Jin had more surprises for her. Suddenly, the box cracked, and then it was blown to pieces as Jin emerged, with chainsaw blades protruding from his back. He told Yomogi that once upon a time, he slept in the air conditioning duct of an abandoned building. It was cold, damp, and smelly, and compared to that place, her box was a vacation in Jet 2. Yomogi got angry at that and decided to finish him off with her next attack. But just then, someone threw the severed head of a monster into the scene. It turned out to be the delinquent Ikari, who was angry at the mother for thinking they could kill him with trash like this. Jin told him to back off, because this was his fight. But Ikari was determined to take down the Momotaro in front of them. However, upon seeing Mother Yomogi's outfit, he lost control. He started lecturing her about dressing decently, but she didn't really care what men thought about her outfit. Ikari then dropped his blood onto the ground to activate its power, but Yomogi decided to cage both guys first. Unfortunately for her, Ikari was too fast and agile for her attack. He easily moved past her attack and landed a solid kick to her jaw, stunning her. Yomogi was shocked because she couldn't predict the attack, but it turned out that even Ikari couldn't predict what his power would do. His blood ability gives him a random power depending on his anger level. And right now, he had a pair of magical red boots that boosted his speed and agility. Ikari thought he should have been angrier to get a better weapon, but Yomogi just thought he was a speed-type opponent, and she wasn't good against those. At the same time, outside the barrier, Naito used his special attack to destroy the barrier. The entire headquarters began to shake, and he realized that the building would soon collapse. However, he believed that the lives of the trapped friends inside were far more valuable than the building, and they needed to rescue them quickly. Everyone inside the building also felt the tremors and realized they needed to get out fast. Meanwhile, Naito and his team arrived where Yomogi was fighting Jin and Ikari. Naito told Yomogi that she was cornered, and after using her powers on such a large scale recently, she must be exhausted. He told her to surrender because she couldn't escape, but Yomogi told him she had no intention of running away. She tossed aside her dress, wearing only a thin layer of black bacteria, as she declared that she would kill everyone here. Meanwhile, Tsubakiri also decided to end his fight with me, but I rolled out of the range of his gravity attack. I summoned my rocket launcher again and attacked them, but the zombie manipulated gravity to stop the missile from reaching him. Tsubakiri then showed another skill of his zombie partner, compressing oxygen into a small sphere that became incredibly heavy thanks to his power. He then shot that gravity sphere towards me, inflicting horrific internal injuries on me. As I groaned in pain, Tsubakiri said he couldn't believe I was the son of Kishin, who was praised as the strongest Oni general in history. He was disappointed in me, who didn't even know whether to believe his story. Meanwhile, Mei also felt the tremors and was afraid as debris began to fall from the roof. However, she remembered how I had told her not to surrender to despair. I told her to cheer for me if she really wanted to live, and she decided to find courage by supporting me. At the same time, the Momotaro named Samadare, who killed my father, arrived at the Momotaro agency headquarters. His new vice captain, Heir, greeted him and immediately started flattering him because he was clearly a living legend among the Momotaro. However, Samadare wanted nothing to do with the bookworm and told her that he works alone, so he didn't need her. Hina was hurt by his answer, but she brazenly followed him and started asking about the headquarters and other things because she came from the countryside, and this was her first time seeing a city. She suddenly asked about Kishin's children, a subject of gossip for everyone at the agency, and Samadare found that to be the only question worth answering. He told her that a long time ago, a fearsome Oni named Kishin had single-handedly brought the Momotaro agency to the brink of destruction. He impregnated many women to spread his genes across the world so that more powerful Oni could be born after him. Hina found that strange because if Kishin truly was the Nick Cannon of the Oni, there would be many of his descendants flooding the streets. Samadare told her that only Oni who inherited Kishin's power were called Kishin's children, and there weren't many of them. However, they were born at predictable times. Hina asked him what he meant, and another Momotaro gave her the answer. He said that the children of Kishin appear when the Momotaro faction is heavily overpowering the Oni. Hina was stunned by the thug, who just appeared in front of her out of nowhere, and he introduced himself as Shina, the captain of Unit 21. Hina felt uneasy around Shina because he looked very intimidating, but he was also quite talkative. He told her that the war between the Momotaro and the Oni had lasted thousands of years, and was actually caused by Kishin and his descendants. When the Momotaro Agency was first established and nearly destroyed the Oni community, Kishin was born. Since then, whenever they are about to finish off all the Oni, Kishin's children awaken their powers and prolong the war. Shina continued to curse the Oni while mocking Hina, and then asked her why it was a problem that Oni could live among humans. She now gave him the textbook answer that the Momotaro are supposed to protect humans from Oni, and if Oni hide among normal people, innocent people could get caught in the fight. Shina scolded her for being a bookworm and said they have politicians on their side who help them clean up the mess, even if their identities are exposed or if humans are caught up in the fight. But those same dirty politicians were causing them trouble. He said that the politicians had started demanding that they make medicine from Oni blood, along with other things, and that angered him the most. He felt that if Oni weren't hiding among humans, they wouldn't have to deal with those bastards. But Hina asked him if it wasn't a good thing that powerful people were helping them. Shina mocked her again, telling her that the politicians only supported them so they would be the first ones protected if things went bad. He ridiculed Hina for being too naive about the true nature of the world, and then turned to Samadare, telling him it must be difficult for him to have a dumb country bumpkin as a partner. That wasn't all he wanted to say, and he approached and confronted Samadare, saying that he was perhaps past his prime since he lost to me, a child, even though I was a child of Kishin. Shina mocked Samadare, saying that the higher-ups put him in the headquarters because they also wanted him to retire from field duty and give better candidates a chance. Shina then walked away, telling Samadare that even if he held on to his seat, he would rise up in the ranks by killing Kishin's children. Samadare immediately told him to stay away from me because he wanted to kill me himself. Shina scoffed and said that would be difficult with only one arm remaining. After he left, Hina asked Samadare if there was only one child of Kishin, and he told her there were many more. At the same time, Tsubakiri told me that there were always 8 children of Kishin in every generation, and I was one of them. He said that if my true power as a child of Kishin awakened, I would be a threat to the Momotaro Agency, which is why they needed to eliminate me. However, he felt that capturing me for experimentation and studying what made me special would be even better, which is exactly what he planned to do now. I stood up as the zombie's power loosened its grip around me, and I cursed Tsubakiri, telling him I didn't care about the legend of Kishin or anything else. I swore that I wouldn't let Tsubakiri get away after everything he had done, and immediately summoned my rocket launcher. I started attacking Tsubakiri relentlessly, forcing him to run around the room to evade the attacks. However, I quickly ran out of endurance and fell to my knees. I felt dizzy from losing too much blood. I couldn't even move now, and Tsubakiri called me a weakling who couldn't withstand this level of fighting. He noticed that the building was starting to collapse, so he ordered his zombie partner to restrain me, and then noticed that Mei was also hiding behind the wall. Tsubakiri said that perhaps he would finish her off next, and I was horrified to see Mei in danger. I told her to run, but Mei stepped out of hiding. She asked Tsubakiri if this was how he killed her parents, and he scoffed, saying he didn't even remember how he exterminated those bugs. Mei asked him how he could kill her parents when they hadn't done anything, but he just laughed in her face, saying they were just insects and could never have families like humans. I told Mei to run away again, but upon hearing her name a second time, Tsubakiri actually remembered her parents. He told her that they begged him to spare her life, and they looked so pathetic that he decided to let her live. However, once he told them he would just kill her later anyway, they were horrified. Mei started crying when she heard this, but I yelled at her that this wasn't the time to cry. I stood up and told Mei that we would defeat these bastards first, and then cry together later. Tsubakiri laughed when he saw me crying and asked how an Oni could cry. I told him I could cry because I have a heart, and if Tsubakiri couldn't understand that, then he was the real demon here. Tsubakiri became enraged by this and used the zombie to crush me even further. He then decided to finish off Mei as well, and the air around her gradually became heavier. I panicked at this, realizing that I was going to fail at protecting someone else. At this rate, I pushed my body to its limit, hoping to find some hidden source of strength that could help me protect Mei. Suddenly, my fingernails tore open, and the blood flowing from them erupted into a vortex of fire. Tsubakiri was stunned by this, because it meant I was awakening my power as a child of Kishin. The children of Kishin have a unique elemental attribute, and mine was fire. Thanks to the newly awakened power, I dissolved the gravity field crushing me, and felt that I still had the energy to fight. Tsubakiri was shocked by this, but he decided to take me down before I could recover. However, just as he tried to use his power, a bullet from me pierced his arm and burned it. Tsubakiri panicked, thinking that I was truly dangerous if I was still that strong with only a little blood left. But right then, I collapsed because I couldn't control the flames surrounding my body. Tsubakiri noticed this too, and he immediately pinned me down again. He then decided to kill Mei, telling her that her parents were pathetic bugs who died miserably, and she would be just like them. I cursed him, asking what Mei's parents had ever done to him. I asked if Oni weren't allowed to live a peaceful life, and that reminded Mei of the time she had asked her parents the same question. They told the girl that everyone is allowed to live a peaceful and happy life, and she started crying when I said the same thing. However, Tsubakiri, the racist, got angry about this and decided to finish both of us off with his ultimate attack. He generated a gravitational vortex using the zombie's power, and I created my gun again to fight back. Tsubakiri thought I was just bluffing because I didn't have enough blood left to create bullets. But I was determined to fight to the end to protect Mei's future. Meanwhile, Mei thought about her parents and how they had told her never to give up on her future. She took a deep breath and cheered for me, and suddenly the flames surrounding me flared up once again. I regained my power, and Tsubakiri couldn't understand how that was possible. However, I was happy that Mei kept her promise to herself, and with my power recharged, I fired a powerful shot into the gravitational vortex, tearing it apart. Tsubakiri could only stand and watch it happen. And then the explosion from my attack hit him directly, causing massive damage. As Tsubakiri lay severely wounded on the ground, he regretted underestimating me. He couldn't believe he had lost to someone who had just awakened their powers. But he realized he was too severely injured to survive the situation. He crawled toward his zombie partner, Manaka, recalling the first time they met. Years ago, Tsubakiri was just a researcher in the Momotaro agency, and he had no interest in joining the fighting forces. He was content experimenting on the Oni they captured and spent most of his time in his lab. But then one day, Manaka came to recruit him into his team. Tsubakiri immediately hated Manaka's habit of interfering in other people's lives, and he rejected his offer. However, his refusal was worth as much as mine was in my family. And the next day, he was transferred to Manaka's team by order of his superiors. Tsubakiri noticed that Manaka had the aura and charisma of a leader, and he was kind enough to pray for the Oni he had killed. Tsubakiri could never understand any of that because after his parents were killed by an Oni, he gradually lost his emotions. He hadn't cared much about his parents anyway, as they were always busy with agency work and never spent time with him. One day, he shared his story with Manaka, who immediately took him to his home and introduced him to his wife and daughter. After that day, Manaka often invited him to dinner with his family, and gradually, Tsubakiri began to feel the warmth of human connection again. However, he was still confused about why Manaka kept a family when they could be a burden to him and his job. Manaka told him that his family gave him the motivation to do his best and return home safely. But soon enough, it would become the cause of his death. One day, Manaka and his team raided an apartment after receiving reports of an Oni, and they found a child there. Manaka saw his own daughter in the boy and couldn't attack him, giving him a chance to run away. However, once the Oni boy reached the street, he went berserk and killed everyone he saw. Unfortunately, Manaka's wife and daughter were shopping at the same time, and the raging Oni attacked them too. Manaka rushed to save them, but he was too late. His wife and daughter had lost their lives, and he was also heavily wounded while fighting the Oni. In his final moments, Manaka regretted showing compassion toward the enemy and declared that all Oni must be ruthlessly eliminated on sight. He requested Tsubakiri to use his corpse so that he could continue fighting the Oni even after death. Tsubakiri accepted his request, and by controlling Manaka's corpse, he soon rose to the rank of captain. Even now, he still hadn't given up, and he swore that he would continue fighting alongside Manaka until they eliminated all Oni. He tried to crawl toward him, but then Manaka's body suddenly burst into flames, and Tsubakiri fell unconscious after losing all hope. On the other hand, I couldn't believe I had won the battle. As I stared blankly at the ceiling, Mei approached me, and suddenly a massive piece of rock fell from the ceiling, landing right next to her. The sound of the falling rock brought me back to my senses, and I told Mei that we needed to get out of this place immediately. However, I didn't have any energy left, and I collapsed onto the floor, covered in blood. At the same time, in the tunnel, Yumogi Mother had enclosed herself in a barrier. After realizing she couldn't win, Naito decided to leave her alone since she didn't have enough power left to seal their base again. Instead, he decided to rescue everyone trapped inside before the building collapsed. Nayo, Jin, and the others ran to the main hall, and to their surprise, they found Kyoa treating my unconscious self. Jin asked him how the hell he managed to survive, and Kyoa said he was practically dead, but he drank some of his own blood that was stuck on the roof, which helped him survive. Upon hearing this, Naito turned to Tsubakiri, telling him he looked pitiful. However, before finishing him off, he asked him what he thought of Shikin's culinary power. Tsubakiri replied that I was strong, but it seemed I was burning up my life force. Jin was curious about the whole cooking business, but Kyoa said he would explain everything once they reached safety. Soon after, Yumogi arrived in the hall, and she was horrified to see Tsubakiri dead. He had changed after meeting Manaka and followed in his master's footsteps. He had even started a family, but now Yumogi was horrified to think about telling Tsubakiri's wife and newborn daughter that he had died in battle. A few hours later, I woke up fully recovered from my injuries. Kyoa and Naito were there to watch over me, and Naito handed me a bottle of water as he remarked that I had truly defeated a Momotaro captain. I finally realized that I had won against Tsubakiri, but I was immediately saddened because nothing could bring Mei's parents back. Naito quietly opened the window, stating that they had lost too much to call this a victory, but they should be glad they survived. Soon after, my classmates and I prepared to return to the academy. Kyoa had decided to adopt Mei, and he asked everyone to visit them again. As the students boarded the train, Mei called out to me, thanked me with a bright smile, and I told her that I would come and see her again. When we arrived at the academy, Nayato began teaching the students about how the Oni agency is divided into 3 sections. There are the combat unit, the medical unit, and the reconnaissance unit. And once they graduate, students will be assigned to those units depending on their abilities. However, the classroom was a mess, with my brain overheating and making audible sounds as I tried to focus on the lesson. Kuina was trying to take care of Rokiro, and Ikuto was sleeping without a care. Naito was angriest at Ikuto, and he woke him up with a snap that generated sound waves. Afterward, the teacher announced that the class was over here, and now everyone had to choose a dormitory roommate. While the students had varying opinions on rooming together, Guji pointed out that one of the boys would be left out because they were an odd number. Naito announced that whoever was left behind would share a room with him, and everyone suddenly started looking at their classmates much more favorably. They were still debating how to divide the rooms, but then Kwana declared that she wanted to be roommates with Rokiro. Everyone was astonished by this, and Guji was jealous of Rokiro. But Naito made it clear that boys and girls have separate rooms. Kuina asked who would take care of Rokiro, and I asked her what she meant. Kuina detailed what she planned to do with Rokiro, and the summary included 4 daily rough doggy-style sessions along with other things. Well, I got as angry as Guji when I heard this, and we both started teaming up against Kuina. I asked Homare to talk some sense into Kuina because I didn't want Rokiro to have all the fun. However, Homare packed her bags and apologized, saying that she was the 3rd girl here, and if she left, their numbers would balance out. She said she would live outside in a cardboard box, and I felt bad hearing that. Anyway, Guji Ikari and I told Jin that he needed to go to jail, meaning rooming with Naito because he was the most lonely person here. Jin coolly replied that he was fine alone, and that made the 3 of us furious. They called him an asshole who couldn't read the room, and then I told Ikari that the 2 of us should room together. Ikari immediately refused, saying he hated being near people, and Guji felt betrayed and abandoned. As he sadly lamented that no one wanted him as a roommate, Rokiro extended a friendly hand, asking if he wanted to be his roommate because he was afraid of Kuina. However, Guji became even angrier and asked Rokiro if he wanted to make him even more jealous by mentioning how Kuina always gave him the Glock 3000 before school. Everyone was surprised to hear that I had gone to school, and I asked them why they were so surprised. Guji replied that his power awakened when he was young, so he never had the chance to go to school. Others also had similar stories, and I realized they had it worse than me. Anyway, Naito told them to stop wasting time and decide on their roommates, and I suggested they use rock, paper, scissors to determine who they would be paired with. Everyone agreed to the idea, and when they gave their signs, Guji turned out to be the odd one out. He was devastated because he now had to room with Naito. I, on the other hand, felt lucky to have avoided Naito, but then I discovered that my roommate was Jin, and honestly, that wasn't much better for me. I was disappointed because Jin was the least cheerful person in the group, but Jin, on the other hand, was curious about me. Before returning to the academy, he had talked to Kyoa about me and learned the details about the Kishin children. Now he was a bit sour about it and told me not to be too confident, just because I was born with special powers. After that, the class became more chaotic than ever, and I started thinking about Mei. I wondered what the little girl was doing and hoped that she was working towards a future where she could be safe and happy. At the same time, at the Momotaro Agency headquarters, the delinquent China was also making his move. He figured that if he took me down, the person who defeated Tsubakiri, he would score a lot of points and be promoted to team leader. He told his squad to get ready because they would depart immediately, and they told him they didn't have the authority to leave on their own initiative. However, Shina didn't care because as long as he got results, his superiors wouldn't complain about his methods. A few days later, my classmates and I were enjoying a public hot spring bath after a hard day of studying. While I complained about Naito being a devil teacher, Jin left because he was done bathing. Ikari also left because he was tired of my ramblings. But at least Guji agreed with me. Rokiro, on the other hand, knew Kuina would be waiting outside to pamper him. And though that was every man's dream, this timid fellow was terrified of the idea. Guji and I thought he was just showing off. But as Rokiro reassured us that he was scared of thoughtful and domineering mothers, we heard Kuina's voice as she tried to enter the men's bath to be with Rokiro. The three boys had different reactions to the situation. But when the door opened, they saw Naito there instead of Kuina, who was being restrained by the other boys. Naito told everyone that they would be conducting an emergency evacuation drill, and that everyone had to gather in the gymnasium in 10 minutes. Well, I arrived late and started telling Naito that it was his fault for disturbing me while I was relaxing. Naito didn't accept any of my nonsense, and asked if I'd prefer to train in the raging storm outside if I had a problem with the evacuation drill. And I immediately changed my mind. Anyway, Naito started his lecture, telling the students that if they couldn't act as a team and take swift action during emergencies, their chances of survival would significantly decrease. He said the exercise was to train them for teamwork, and then pointed to the supplies kept in the corner of the room. He told them to stay in the gym until further notice while he patrolled the campus. Everyone was relieved when Naito finally left, but now they didn't know what to do. Jin was the first one to notice a pot among the supplies, and I said there might be a bomb inside. I pointed my finger gun at it, saying the best way to deal with a bomb was to shoot it from afar. But Ikari and Homare told me to stop, because even a monkey could tell that pot held their dinner. I laughed, telling them I was only joking, but Ikari got angry with me and called me a stupid sandwich. Chiki argued with him, but the quarrel ended rather quickly when Homare started apologizing for insulting him. Anyway, while they were arguing, Kuina decided to go get the food for her darling Rokiro, and she discovered it was mainly curry and rice. When everyone sat down to eat, I started being difficult and asked if anyone wanted my bean sprouts because I hated any food that looked green. Homare told me not to be picky, and although she liked stir-fried bean sprouts, she wasn't fond enough to accept someone else's leftovers. Just then, I noticed Ikari near the pot because he had finished his first portion, and I immediately swallowed all my food in 3 gulps before rushing to get a second portion. Jin watched them from afar, and although he also wanted to rush and get another serving, he couldn't eat fast because he found the seasoning unbearable. And he didn't want anyone to think he was weak, so he just ate at a slow pace. Kuina, on the other hand, asked Rokiro if he wanted another serving, and he replied that he was full, and if he ate too much, he would get nauseous. He was slightly envious of the idiots who could eat as much as they wanted, but he was also glad they had pudding, along with the curry. He told Kuina how much he liked the pudding, but the bitch got jealous and asked him if he loved the pudding more than he loved her. Rokiro didn't even know what to say as Kuina started shaking him. But then she decided to make him pudding later, and he thanked her for it. This suddenly changed Kuina's mood, and she told Rokiro he could have her pudding too. Anyway, once everyone had finished their dinner and dessert, Homare discovered there was one leftover package of pudding. She asked if anyone had forgotten theirs, but everyone had already had their portion of pudding. She then asked if anyone wanted the extra package, and Jin decided to stop acting tough and raised his hand. However, I snatched the pudding from Homare's hand immediately. Jin dropped his hand in disappointment, but I managed to see it. I told Jin not to hesitate if he was hungry, and handed him the last plate of curry that I had saved for later, but my sincere gesture only angered Jin further. At the same time, Naito was checking the rooms one by one as part of the emergency evacuation drill. Just then, the Academy's green courier pig arrived, and Naito picked up the phone to find the principal on the other end of the line. The principal told him that he didn't need to strictly follow the rules of the emergency drill because they both knew there was no real danger on campus. He told Naito to go and spend quality time with his students, but then realized that the students would be more comfortable if he wasn't there. Naito agreed, but he just hoped his students could get along. But he didn't see that happening anytime soon. He started talking about how everyone carried their own emotional baggage, and getting along with others wasn't easy for any of them. Back in the gym, Jin prepared to fight me over the pudding, and I called him a coward for not daring to say he wanted more pudding. This angered Jin even more, and he unleashed his blood saw net, causing me to summon my bazooka as well. Jin shot the saw net at me first, and I managed to block it. But just as I was about to fire back, Naito arrived. He was disappointed that we risked our lives over a pudding, and even more disappointed that we had eaten all the food and left none for him. Everyone was shocked to hear that Naito was supposed to eat with them, and Homare started apologizing because she had eaten all the bean sprouts. The other students were more brazen, and they told Naito it was his fault for not making it clear sooner, and he couldn't deny their logic. Anyway, he told them that using their abilities or fighting in the gym was strictly prohibited, and anyone who left the hall without permission would be expelled. Then he left with the pudding, but forgot the spoon. Homare wondered if they should chase after him and give him the spoon, but Quina told her to forget about it because it wasn't worth risking expulsion. Everyone decided to go to sleep after that, and I was excited because I just wanted to hang out with people my age. Jin was the complete opposite, and he kept his distance from everyone. Meanwhile, Quina told Rokiro to get inside her sleeping bag so they could cuddle all night, and he really didn't like that idea. This angered the pervert Guji, who also wanted to be lucky, and Ikari was the complete opposite of him. He had the soul of a conservative, believing boys and girls should only start dating after they turned 20, and he didn't even like the idea that they were all sleeping together. He immediately used a curtain to divide the hall into 2 parts to separate the boys and girls, but I was still having fun because this felt like a school trip to me. Well, Ikari decided to join the fun and said it was time for ghost stories. Chiki started sweating because he was slightly scared of ghosts and similar things, but the other boys were eager to share scary stories. Ikari told Jin that he would also share a story with them, and I hoped that Jin would feign disinterest so I could have an excuse to back out. However, Jin had no problem with ghost stories, and I realized I was screwed. Rokuro told the first story about how he felt like someone was always staring at him since arriving at the academy, but everyone told him it was just Quina. Next, Guji talked about how scared he was every time he heard Naito's footsteps while he was wrestling with his snake. I was happy because there were no ghost stories yet. But then Ikari started telling a story about a woman's ghost on a mountain pass. Suddenly, the lights went out and I screamed a wild scream in fear. I acted cool and tried to shift the blame when Guji turned on the flashlight, but there were bigger things to worry about. Jin said that the rumors about ghost stories attracting real ghosts seemed true, and then pointed to a ghost standing in the corner of the room. It was only the principal trying to scare the kids into bonding a little more, but I, Rokiro, and Guji were terrified. They clung to Inkari, who pushed them away because it was his first time seeing a real ghost and he wanted to become a ghost hunter. He charged at the principal, who blasted him away with a force field, and Jin decided to go next. The cowardly trio clung to him again, and as he tried to escape them, I let fear take over my reason. I summoned my gun and started shooting wildly, blowing up the room without even aiming directly at the principal. When Naito arrived at the gym afterward, he was astonished by what had happened, and the principal asked him to tell the students it was just a bad dream and there were no ghosts. The next day, everyone believed they had a terrible dream due to the stormy night. When Naito entered the classroom, he told them they would be going to Tokyo for the next field exercise. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. My story ends here. Make sure you've subscribed to the channel and turned on notifications. Thank you for watching the video until the end, and see you next time.